Welcome to another episode of A Come Together.
Yep.
Awesome. Kieron, welcome. We're live. How are you doing today?
Hello.
Happy New
I'm
Year.
very well, thank you. Happy New Year to you too. I'm very pleased to be speaking to you today on New Year's Day.
Yeah, that's right. I appreciate you taking the time on a holiday. And I'm really excited to talk to you. I found your profile because I was looking for, I love Hollywood and I've been learning a lot about just history in general recently. And I've been trying to find all the niches and fun aspects of history of the, topics that I love. And so I came across your book and it's actually on the way to me now. I haven't had a chance to read it
Hmm.
yet, but I did get a chance to shoot off an email and see if you wanted to talk about it
Sure.
first, and a bunch of other things because it happens to be that I'm also a writer. I got a
Yep.
creative writing and literature degree in college, and I've been writing short poetry for the most part ever since. And I teach high school English,
Okay.
and and you have a rare situation where you're on both ends of the writing spectrum, where you're editing and you're finding,
True.
good stories
True.
and fascinating stories,
True.
and then you're a writer yourself. So
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk to you about a whole bunch of stuff today.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Please.
What ages do you teach in high school?
Um, I rotate on a yearly basis. This year is ninth, 10th, and 12th.
And what
Um,
age is that?
that would be 13,
Okay.
13, 14 is ninth grade, 14,
Okay.
15 is 10th grade, and then
Okay.
17, 18 is 12th
Yep.
grade.
Okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What's your what are you curious about?
I was just wondering if it, what ages it was. And yeah, I mean everyone's always interested in education because we've all been through it.
hmm
Some work in it and their own stories of what was good or bad about their schooling. Yeah, so
I had it happens to be that I was very lucky to go to very good schools, but I had a very
okay.
hard time in school.
Okay.
Um, I had a very difficult time taking tests. I had a very I would get very overwhelmed, and then I would panic, and the
Mhm.
information that I'd spent hours and hours studying and taking notes on would just
Okay.
fly out of my brain,
Yeah.
and then I thought I was dumb until I got to college, and until took a creative writing class with one of my
Yeah.
professors, and I learned that I'm much more eloquent and well spoken when I have an opportunity to put my own words to an idea and not be boxed into particular
Okay.
answers or perspectives. Yeah, which kind
Well,
of fits the rest of my life.
it's great that you had that experience to sort of to see to find your way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it helps me a lot as far as connecting with my students because
Yeah.
I try very much to make it as relatable and I mean, the classes are relatively small. They're between 10 and 15 kids apiece,
Okay.
which is a
Yeah.
really good size.
Yeah.
It gives me a good amount of time to be able
Yeah.
to focus on each kid a good amount.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I understand. I know the feeling of not being able to sit behind your desk for,
Yeah.
45 minutes or
Yeah.
starting a class at 5:45 p.m.
Yeah.
and realizing that you got another 45 minutes of your day to go and you're
Mm.
17 and all you want to
Mm.
do is play basketball. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I relate pretty strongly to that. Can you
Yeah.
want to tell me a little bit about yourself and your career? And I want to kind of dive into some of the work that you've done and hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah. So I've worked across publishing and journalism for many years now, maybe 20 odd years now. And we're speaking today because I wrote a book called the History. Or it's got various titles over the years, but more recently it's been called The History of Hollywood. Once it was called Dark History of Hollywood. And this book was published by a publisher I worked for in-house at the time as an editor in the UK called Amber Books. But cinema had always been a great interest of mine from being a child, and I did go to the National Film and Television School in England, and did a screenwriting course. And my interest at that point was in becoming a screenwriter, but also I was always interested in generally in how the industry worked.
Hmm.
And my father was in the industry a bit as a screenwriter himself, so I met people over the years who worked in the industry. I went on film sets, I went into cutting rooms. When I was a student, I interviewed some people. My first degree is in history. I interviewed some people about the process of making a film. I interviewed a producer, a writer, a director, a designer, an editor, a cinematographer, a composer, and what a how to get them to tell me their stories of how it works from their point of view. So not just doing a celebrity interview, which is usually an actor or a director, but actually taking different people involved in
Hmm.
putting on the show. Um, and when the opportunity came to write this book for the publisher, I put my hand up, and I was very pleased to get the commission to write it. And it was a very sort of intensive but very happy summer writing the book. And I would have happily spent many months and years writing it, but that wasn't the way it was going to work. There was a deadline to meet.
Hmm.
But deadlines are quite exciting, and it's nice to sort of to step up to that challenge.
Sure.
And although I already knew a bit about Hollywood, I learned a great deal more, mainly sitting in the British Library reading other books on the subject.
Right. And I'm so curious, even just from that little introduction, what have you found as you spoke to different people? Because, one thing that I did, or I'm doing, is I'm focusing on, similar to what you did, I'm interviewing stunt doubles, I'm interviewing
Okay.
music supervisors, I'm
Mm.
trying to interview writers and editors. I interviewed the gentleman that produced the Taken series, which was a lot of fun.
Okay.
And excuse me. And I'm also trying to kind of get a feel for this, and reading about the history of Hollywood. Hollywood's kind of gone through different waves of power, that
Mm.
or creative power,
Mhm.
and and to kind of see even today the remnants of, let's say, the directing generation, like how much power and their prestige and reputation is,
Do you mean
whether it's
like the generation from the sort of late '60s to the early '80s? That
correct.
you mean
Like,
that
yeah,
kind of
60s, 70s till
yeah?
today, even the
Okay.
Spielbergs and
Yeah. Modern
the
Scorsese and yeah,
Scorseses and all
yeah,
those gentlemen that pretty much can have an open check to any studio they want to make any
yeah,
idea that they
yeah.
want. And it's cool kind of to see how that works and how the dynamics of Hollywood have changed over the
Mm.
years. So what have you found when you started, or what are some things that surprised you or didn't surprise you when you started interviewing people?
So I didn't interview people for this book in particular. There wasn't really the time or the budget to do that. I
Sure.
interviewed people. I've interviewed people over the years for other projects, or just spoke
Sure.
to people I
Yeah, yeah,
knew.
yeah. In
So,
general.
trying to think of one particular thing. I'm not sure I can settle on one sort of particular gem there. I think what struck me when I was researching the book, which I didn't really know about before, was sort of the level of corruption in Hollywood in say the
Hmm.
forties, how the unions were corrupted by the mob. That was something I hadn't known about. It's in all the books. I just hadn't read it before. So
Sure.
that was an interesting area.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of you were talking about the director's generation, I think it's interesting the way that the power shifts over the decades, and I think those directors would now would say how difficult it is to get certain projects made and easy to get other projects made, and how the studios are producing far fewer films and they're
Yeah.
producing a lot of like Marvel type superhero things
Hmm.
and a few quite low budget films, and like the mid budget movie is very hard to get financed now. And I think about someone like Robert Redford, who died last year,
Yeah.
2025, made in 1985, 86, I think 85, I think, Out of Africa with Sidney Pollack, and you kind of think, oh, would they make that movie today? That
Hmm.
with two big film stars, an expensive film, filming in Kenya or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they would finance that film today, or at least not at that level. It would be a kind of much smaller production. So it's
Yeah, it'd probably
interesting
go
to
to
say
streaming, I
the
imagine.
way movie. Sorry,
I'd probably go to streaming, I imagine.
and it might be a TV series. It might be a TV series on streaming. Yeah. So how
Hmm.
things change and the different while Hollywood may make fewer, say, grown-up films. There are other avenues now. There are other outlets.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that film has definitely become more democratized over the years, especially with the technology that's been available to everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I'm showing my high school students now the movie Dead Poet Society,
Okay.
and they are. It's a. I had to give them.
That came out when I was about their age. I was 17 when it
There
came
you
out.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, it's actually funny that you say that, because last year I showed them The Blind Side. They said,
Mm.
what year did this come out? I said 2008. They said, that's the year we were born. And I was like, oh my goodness gracious, that's
Mm.
that's
Mm.
wild. But I had to really prep them in advance and explain that, what a drama was, and how everything, what from the cinematography to the acting is much more intentional, and that, they're not gonna that this is a different type of movie what they're used to watching, where
Okay.
not everything is a cut immediately, and the bodies tell stories and the camera tells stories, and
Okay.
you still get some of that today, but I think a lot less frequently.
Okay.
And so I was kind of introducing them to that genre, and they didn't really know what to do with it, you know?
Okay.
And yeah, I thought that it's, so it is a, I guess that genre is a lost art. There's a great book by a gentleman, Ben Fritz, called The Big Picture, I believe. And he's a Wall Street Journal writer for many
Okay.
years.
Yeah.
And he talks about how the reason why franchises are the primary films that the studios are
Yeah.
greenlighting today is because the international audience is so important now to the
Yeah.
box office.
Yeah. It's
And
true.
there's not as much desire for an Ethan Hawke, Robin Williams drama as
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
is, for another Transformer,
Yeah.
blowing
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
Taiwan or Manhattan or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, you
Yeah.
know?
That there was a point where the markets beyond the US were just a sort of extra thing.
Hmm.
Whereas now it's essential and integral to how they budget the movie. And at the
Yeah,
time when Dead Poets came out, Ethan Hawke wasn't was it was I think it's his first film, so he wasn't a name at all. Robin Williams was a name, but
sure. Yeah.
I've not seen the film since it came out. It's kind of so it sort of surprises me to for you to say, oh, the kids found it kind of a challenge to watch because to me it seemed like a very straightforward film, but obviously times move on
Yeah,
and the
yeah. Well,
taste moves on. Yeah.
we're seeing our attention spans getting,
Okay.
shot down, and it happens to be that because the school that I teach at is an Orthodox Jewish school,
Okay.
most of the students don't have smartphones,
Oh,
and
okay.
they're not even allowed to have them. And so you could see the developmental difference. Even I'm the oldest of six, and my youngest brother is 14. I'm
Yeah.
30, and
Yeah.
and the difference in attention and the difference in the way
Okay.
that you can appreciate a film, I think, is
Yeah.
pretty dramatic without having that smartphone,
Okay.
and the way that you develop and grow up. Can you tell me a little bit about the corruption with the mafia and the unions, and if you want to explain, just if anyone doesn't know what unions are and the way they work within the world of Hollywood?
Okay. Let's see if I can remember. So, with the ending of Prohibition in, or with Prohibition ended in the 20s. When did it end? Anyway, the mob when alcohol became legal again to sell, the mob was looking for a new outlet. Hollywood became
Hmm.
one of those outlets, and one of the ways in was that they would approach the technicians unions, the people who managed the unions, the organizations who supported the people the carpenters at the studios, these are all the projectionists,
Hmm.
and the body that was supposed to look after their interests of the projectionists and the carpenters, for example, and the scene shifters. Um, and the mob managed to infiltrate that union and sort of say, you know, we will. They managed to infiltrate it and actually start running it, and then say to the studios, rather than improving the conditions for these workers,
Hmm.
give us a kickback, a financial, give us some money, and we'll all pay a little lip service to improve conditions. So we'll do a little bit for the workers, but mainly money's coming back to the mob.
Hmm.
And if you don't do it, all these workers, all the projectionists will shut down, and then you won't have anyone coming. No one paying tickets,
Sure.
buying tickets at your cinemas. And this happened in the late 30s and early 40s, and finally the law caught up with them, and the head of one of the studios went to prison for a short time, and the mobsters were imprisoned, and I think one of them later died in a suspicious car explosion when he was
Hmm.
living near Vegas. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Suspicious
tell I
indeed,
tell it
huh?
I tell it better in the book, but yeah,
I see. I see. Yeah, there was oh man, I'm gonna have to recall the name of the book, but I read about studio head corruption and misappropriation of funds.
yeah.
Um, oh man, it's gonna drive me crazy. And I believe it was the Columbia.
So this is the
Um,
David Begelman book, Indecent
oh,
Exposure. David
yes,
Begelman.
Indecent Exposure. Yes, that book
Mm.
was
Yeah.
spectacular.
Okay.
Yeah, cover to cover was
It's
great.
a,
Is
it's a
that is
long
that
time.
is that
It's a
around the
long
same
time
time?
ago since I looked at that book, but yeah, David
What
Begelman's
did you say?
story.
Sorry.
I tell his story briefly in my book, but only in
Oh
sort of a
yeah.
few hundred words. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great. It was a
yeah.
great book, and is that the same around the same time period that is occurring, or?
No, because Begelman was I think late 70s, early 80s, and the story I was talking about the
Mhm.
1940s. Yeah.
Gotcha. And
In fact,
how did Hollywood?
the studio head who went to prison for a while, actually had a relationship with the young Marilyn Monroe, like before she was famous. Yeah,
Really?
he was much older. But
He's been getting a lot of people in trouble for a while,
yeah,
huh?
yeah.
I guess. I don't know if you could blame her, but yeah. How does one remove the mafia once they kind of get their hooks into,
Sorry,
some
how
kind
does?
of one remove the mafia once they get their hooks into an organization? I mean,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
well, those guys did go to prison, so there was that sort of I think ended that thing. I don't know enough now to sort of know how close things are, but that was the story from that period, and it's told I think again in quite a good book. The I can't remember it right now. I'll tell you before
it's
the
okay.
before
It'll
the end.
come to you.
It, it,
Very
it'll
well.
surface before the end of the interview.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a episode with a gentleman that studies the history of gambling in
Okay.
general and in Vegas and the mafia
Okay.
connection,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously. And one of the ways that he basically said that the government had to catch the mafia in Vegas and get rid of them was pretty much to kind of just strip them of their civil liberties and then,
Okay.
find them guilty
Yeah.
and just toss them in prison.
Yeah.
Um, which I'm not quite sure what I think. And the problem, I've been thinking about this quite a bit recently, that, people say that regulation leads to corruption, obviously, but lack of regulation leads to corruption too. So
Yeah.
like, there's really no perfect world, and I think all we have to do is just really be as vigilant as possible
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
there is no perfect system that people will not be able to, kind
Yeah.
of sneak their way into
Yeah.
and, one way or another really cause some kind of damage. Um, so tell me a little bit. I'm sorry. So how did you get commissioned to? So you said that you were in-house, you're an editor,
Yeah.
and you get commissioned to write this book, and you have a couple of months to write it.
No, I think I had sort of from June to sort of late September. Yeah. But I had to
Is
sort of
that
clear my.
adequate time?
Not
It
really,
sounds short.
but it was a real thrill. It was the book is I think 58,000 words, including captions, like quite long captions. Um,
Hmm.
and no, it was a great thrill to write it. And yeah, I would have happily spent much longer, but that was what the schedule they were working on. And there's quite sort of I had nothing else planned for that summer, so it was quite nice
Right.
to say, okay, this is all I'm going to do. And
Right. And
I
you always
will.
wanted to be a writer?
Um, I suppose, when I was younger, I was thinking about movies, and my father's, has been a journalist and a novelist and a screenwriter. So there's a sort of, you grew up absorbing this sort of way of life, for better or
Hmm.
for worse. Maybe I should have
Sure.
kind of looked further afield, um, and so all my jobs have sort of been on different sides of this desk, either writing a book or editing a book, or when I was in journalism, a lot of my work was sort of finding books that we could do extracts from, like not
Hmm.
finding pulling the thread out of a biography to tell a story. So it's all sort of storytelling in different ways. And then before that, I was sort of trying to do screenwriting, so I was trying to make up stories and things. And so
Yeah.
it's always
And
interesting
what's the kind of difference in the
about
process?
story. Sorry.
What's the difference in the creative process when you're trying to come up with a story? How do you kind of outline that?
Well, I suppose I've had less experience or less success in that field, and I suppose with that you're sort of stuck with the blank page. Whereas when you're writing a non-fiction book, you're always drawing on something. There's always another book on David Begelman
Hmm.
or on 1940s Hollywood that you can look at. So there's always more research to be done, and the danger is you end up doing too much research, or you run out of time, or
Yeah.
you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
And in a
Certainly.
fiction something kind of seems interesting to you, and you sort of start running with it and think, is this going to go very far? I sometimes think about fiction a bit like a sort of Dr. Frankenstein's studio, and you've got
Mhm.
all these sort of bits of severed limbs and a torso but no head. Well, you've got a head but no torso, and you can't quite get the electricity to it to make it come alive. But you've got all these bits. Or on a good day, you think of it more like an artist studio where there are kind of maybe some unfinished paintings, but there's bits and pieces going on, and you think at one point I will finish that and it will come to life and go somewhere.
Yeah.
So I've got
Yeah.
various folders of ideas and things scribbled down and things. But also,
Yeah.
I'm very busy right now with other things. So
Sure. 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 Well, if you're editing and you're looking for a good story, what are you looking for that catches your eye as far as freshness or character, a more character-driven story? How do you determine what's like, what's going to try to catch people's eye?
I mean, mainly now I'm working in non-fiction, and a lot of that's history. And you're so a lot of the history is sort of quite well. Actually, it's just the history of a country, or it's the history of a particular moment. So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily hugely character led. That said, character led history is very stimulating because it's much more interesting for the reader to follow one person through or a few people through a story
Sure.
rather than 15 different presidents or something.
Yeah.
um, so so you're looking for the kind of both the interesting idea and also how well the author tells it and how well do they write. You know,
And what would be considered good or bad writing? Like, what would you
well,
look to avoid?
you know, avoid the cliches. Tell me something I didn't already know. If you can tell me something I already know, kind of tell me it to me in a surprising way that kind of takes me, makes me think, oh, I didn't know. I was reading something earlier today, and I thought, well, I kind of know most of this already, and the person who's telling it to me isn't sort of presenting it with any sort of fresh insight. So even if it's a well-known story, at least have such a good perspective on it that you're bringing something fresh to the topic.
Right. Right. Right.
What
Right.
kind of tasks do you set your pupils to write at school?
Um, so it's actually funny you ask. I primarily focus on creative and self-expressive
Mm-hmm.
assignments, as
Mm-hmm.
in, write a story about, like I just had my class write a poem, and the two rules were it has to be about something negative and it can't end on a happy note.
Okay,
Uh,
that's good.
And yeah, and one of the reasons why is, like you said earlier, to kind of avoid those cliches.
Mm.
And my first year of writing in college, I would only write, happy poetry, and it
Mm.
was all bad.
Yeah, yeah.
It was all quite awful.
Yeah.
And my professor, pulled me aside one time. He said, "Listen," he goes, "I really do appreciate the mindset that you have where you're trying to focus
Mm,
on the good."
mm,
He's like, "See," he goes, "the problem is it comes off sounding inauthentic and not
mm,
quite as organic." And
yeah.
he's like, maybe try to be a little bit more raw or a little bit more real in your
Mm,
writing.
mm,
And and then as the years have kind of followed, I've noticed that my writing was always better when I was kind of trying to work through something that was going
yeah.
on in my life.
Yeah.
And whether that was fictional or whether that was a poem or whether that was a letter
Yeah.
to myself, and I'm just trying to work through,
Yeah.
what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of trying, and I'm trying to give my students that ability to do that because, you know, I'm sure you're just as aware as I am that by the time these ninth graders are in 12th grade, who knows what what college English class is going to look like, and to
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
extent,
Yeah.
it's even going to even be relevant or necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think about what is going to be
Mm,
useful to them
yeah.
as they get older. And I think that one of the most useful things that we can use the English language for is to help express ourselves and understand others, and try to, if we don't understand others, to
Yeah.
use our words to figure out what it is that we get or don't get,
Yeah.
and to kind of come to some kind of similar conclusion, you know?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Um, yeah, and I've found, and I've experimented with this with the students in class,
Yeah.
that by repackaging what they say back to them and then presenting an argument makes them much more likely to be thoughtful about it or consider another perspective,
Okay.
because
Okay.
you're showing them that, hey, I understand exactly where you're coming from. Like,
Yeah.
you are heard. I understand you. I understand the point you're making and what you're
Hmm.
trying to say.
Yeah.
Have you considered, in your train of thought or in the way that you're framing this, have you considered that perspective as well? Because
Hmm.
maybe that'll change the way that you saw, the way that
Yeah.
you actually have this preposition, this
Yeah.
presupposition rather.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it typically works. It really
Oh,
does.
good. Okay.
Um, so if that could be the skill that I teach them, as far as
Mm.
self-expression and writing goes,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I'm very happy. And then as
Yeah.
far as literature goes, we kind of bounce around quite a bit. Their
So
attention span, like I said,
what kind
is
of literature are they reading in class? I
uh,
mean, or
we
for class? But
it depends. It depends on what they're. I actually give them a lot of input. So if they want to talk about something, one class loves the history of film. So
okay.
we've actually been talking about Pixar. We've been talking about how the company got started,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and all their creative strategies.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the fact that they don't take typical characters. They don't, like, every story is not about a human being or two human beings. They have to be something, a different take on
Yeah. Yeah.
main characters.
Yeah.
They can't be musicals, and they can't be traditional love stories
Yeah.
where boy meets girl, tries to find her, there's a conflict, and they end up back
Yeah.
together again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because at that point in the 90s, Disney was really suffocating the market with all their, all their golden age of Disney animation movies from Katzenberg and Michael Eisner,
Yeah.
and Pixar didn't know how to stand out from them,
Okay.
and this is one
Yeah.
of the ways that they came up with.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so reading material on that, some classes like psychology more,
Yeah.
understanding ourselves and understanding kind of our behavior and the way that we think,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we talk about a lot about where the place of anxiety, what place it has and
Yeah.
where it comes from and how it gets out of hand,
Yeah.
um, and a lot of other experiences and emotions that we have to try to understand ourselves.
Yeah.
And the best thing, they look at me, they go, "Mr. Hirschman, this is just a therapy. This is just therapy class." And it's like,
Lucky
I
them.
mean, yeah, lucky you. Yeah, exactly. You're lucky I'm not billing you for this.
Yeah.
You're billing your parents for this
Yeah.
because I really would or should. But one of my biggest challenges that I have as a writer personally, I'm good at creating the fresh content and unique kind of perspective on things. One of my challenges, I have a very hard time keeping track of a whole story or a whole
Yeah.
sequence
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
narrative in my head,
Mm.
and I'm not organized enough to really be able to really know how to lay it all out. That's not
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
my brain works. Would you have any kind of recommendations as to the way to kind of get more organized, or any recommendations how to keep track of a story for a longer period of time?
Well, I suppose we all find our own way there somewhere, and some people would say you have to kind of outline it very, very, very rigidly, and then stick to your outline, and then you kind of know where you're going. And other people say, well, I don't need to do that because I know where I'm going, so that's fine. And
Yeah.
others would say, no, I just want to kind of start and see where I go, and I hope that I go somewhere interesting. And maybe that's the thing to do. That
Yeah.
you'll go
Yeah.
you'll go somewhere, and as you're going, you will find. I mean, maybe it's not the story you originally thought you were going to write, but you write something
Mhm.
else, and that becomes something worthwhile anyway. So it doesn't matter where you thought you were going to go in the first place because the story has led you elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I kind of hope that these things sort of uh, work for people, and like everyone's different. Everyone has a different approach to it. I mean, not the English novelist William Boyd says when people say to him, "I've got a great idea for the opening of a novel," and he says, "I always say to them, but have you got an ending?" Because for him, obviously, it's more important to know where you're going to go, and he always knows where his novel's going to start, when it's going to end, what the story's going to be before he does all his research first, and before he actually starts writing it, like a year
Mhm.
to research it, a year to write it. And he says,
Mhm.
and the researching and the sort of planning does involve lots of sort of blind alleys and sort of think, oh no, that one will have to change it, things. But others work differently. Obviously, there was a lot of what you don't want is a lot of sort of abandoned material. Um, Although I suppose you could say that's part of the process of finding your way as a writer and thinking, "Oh, actually, I can't quite bring this character to life, or I don't quite know where this particular story is going." But from all that, something else might happen. That you might
Yeah. You could
like you
recycling.
think of something else, and you have a different character, and you realize, and you work out, and also people's styles. Some people write a lot of plot, some people don't write a lot of plot, and it doesn't matter as long as what you're doing works. That
Mhm. Yeah.
what and finding, I suppose, also just finding your voice. That I think it's quite interesting when you can't look at some writers and things. I can't obviously can't right now. I can't think of any examples, but who in the early work were doing something and it was sort of okay, but they hadn't quite hit their stride, and then they sort of found, whether it's in novels or in screenwriting, and then they sort of found, oh, this is what I'm good at,
Yeah.
and like they were trying to be a very serious writer, but actually naturally they were a sort of comic writer, and that's what their
Mhm.
strength was, and or vice versa, or they were trying to be funny, but they weren't very funny, but they were great at sort of historical research, and that was what they should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy
Definitely.
who writes the guy who writes The Crown, or the TV series The Crown, about the
Mhm.
British royal family, he did various things at first in screenwriting, including writing sort of a couple of romantic comedies and things, and then kind of hit on the fact that he was better at doing factually based dramas, things about real people, researching
Yeah.
them, and then writing a drama around that.
Yeah.
And that's what since he found that's pretty much all he's done since then, is write things that are about either the crown or politicians or people in public life.
But that goes back to what you were mentioning earlier, where, the difference between having a blank page or some kind of strand to
Yeah,
start pulling
yeah,
at,
yeah,
and see exactly where you go with that.
yeah,
Yeah. It's also fun. I've been a huge Springsteen nut for about seven
yeah,
years now.
yeah,
And I've listened to, and one of the one of the great things I tend to like artists that have this. They have the artists that have big archives of all their
Yeah,
live performances
yeah,
are a ton of fun to go through because you really get a idea as to who the artist is as they perform and the way they interact with the
yeah,
crowd
yeah,
and you really could feel the magic and the energy in the air
yeah,
even when you're listening 50 years later. You could
yeah,
I mean
yeah,
it's so tangible.
yeah.
And one thing that I've noticed that, because I would listen to, let's say, an album, and I'd listen to the tour and see how, the live versions compared
Yeah.
to the studio versions. I tend
Yeah.
to like the live versions more.
Okay.
But one of the things that I noticed was that Springsteen would have uh, snippets where he would kind of be improvising in the middle of a song, and he'd
Okay.
have phrases where he'd like kind of throw them out while there was an instrumental break,
Okay.
and he'd kind of mess around with words and flow with a little rhythm
Yeah.
and just kind of mix something in there. And then the next album, you'll hear those words again
Okay.
as the name of the song that he was been
Okay.
working on the whole time,
Yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
see that the chord structure and the music structure
Hmm.
kind of was plucked from this other song.
Yeah.
And he, and if you want the examples, I think was in Backstreets is one of his more famous songs from Born to Run in
Okay.
'75,
Yeah.
and Drive All Night from The River in
Yeah.
1980. A bunch of the lyrics and the verses came from his impromptu rambles
Okay.
during Backstreets in
Yeah.
the years leading
Yeah.
up to it. So
That's interesting to trace the sort of creative process. Yeah.
yeah, 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 definitely. And that's the fun thing about people. And I guess, you kind of almost become a historian in and of itself
Hmm.
when you kind of dive into
Hmm.
these musicians and these
Hmm.
performances as deeply as you can, because you do notice these
Hmm.
nuances and you pick up
Yeah.
on them and you
Yeah.
find out, hey, when you played that rendition of this and this particular version
Hmm.
that year, like what were you thinking of? And
Hmm.
it's a ton of fun. It really is very
Yeah.
cool. Um, have you?
Uh,
What? Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
Carry on. Yeah.
Please, please.
My question is irrelevant to what you've just been saying. So maybe ask you one first.
Yeah, please go ahead. I
No.
was going to change the topic too.
Okay. I was just going to ask. I was thinking about the kids that you were showing Dead Poet Society to, and I thought,
Mhm.
can you show them a black and white film, or have you?
It would have to be a cell, and I would have to prime them. I'd have to emotionally prepare them for what they're about to experience.
Okay.
If they just walked in from the whole day and they just plopped down in the seats and I popped on a black and white film, the odds are very, very low that they would just sit there and watch it. But if I would sit
Okay.
there and I'd explain what it is they're about to look for and and provide some of the context,
Okay.
because one of the big things that I noticed as a teacher is that my students don't want to be there, and I'm the teacher. I want to be there.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
find education valuable,
Yeah.
and so I'm putting all this time and effort into
Yeah.
creating fun and creative
Hmm.
assignments and
Yeah.
fun, interesting topics for them,
Yeah.
and all they think is, "Oh, I have to go to class now."
Yeah.
So, I actually, there's a certain point with a couple of my classes throughout the years where I've been able to essentially tell them, I want you guys to have autonomy and
Yeah.
maturity and to start
Hmm.
making your own
Hmm.
decisions.
Yeah.
If you feel like if you don't want to be in class for these 40 minutes, but you'll do the makeup work for the week. I'll give you a week's worth of assignments in advance.
Yeah.
If you come to me at the end of the week and you provide with me all the assignments, you don't have to come to my class and you'll
Hmm.
still get a good grade.
Yeah.
Because as long as to me, and perhaps, I hope you agree, but a lot of this stuff is a muscle that you
Yeah.
just have to keep on exercising.
Hmm.
And I don't care whether you're exercising it between
Hmm.
the hours of 4 and 4:40, or whenever, or 10 o'clock to 10:45 at night, if in your
Yeah.
own room if
Yeah.
you want. But I just want you to be doing that,
Yeah.
and giving them that opportunity. And almost none of them took me up on it.
Okay.
That when provided the opportunity
Yeah.
for that, they said, you know what, if we don't have to be here, but like what else are we going to do anyway? Then
Hmm.
let's go. At least it's a choice that they make, that they
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
join.
And also,
Yeah.
in not being there, that involves them having to think more about managing their own time or studying at home. No, and then if they
Hmm.
go with you, they say, okay, well, you're the teacher, Mr. Hirschman. You're responsible for what we have to do.
Yeah. 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 It's The problem is with teaching, I was talking about this in an episode I was recording yesterday,
Mm.
is that you really have to be a moron or a martyr to be a teacher, and I do it part time, and I have I do sales on the side, and I
What
do
kind of
this,
sales?
but
What kind of sales do you do?
I sell medical equipment. It's a little
Okay.
family business that my
Okay.
dad had started when I was a kid, and so I have the luxury of working from home and being
Mm.
able to go into school, and if I have anything urgent, I could text, email, or
Hmm.
call a customer back or deal with anything I got to deal with. But primarily, it's usually pretty quiet by 4 to 6:15
Hmm.
p.m. every day. So I'm typically not missing too much, and it gives me the opportunity to feel like I'm giving
Hmm.
back. And I also,
Hmm.
once I started, I loved it. Once
Hmm.
you start seeing the potential and the creativity of kids, it just reminds you of how much hope there could be,
Hmm. Hmm.
for a lot of, there's a ton of potential and talent and creativity out there in the youth, and we kind of just watch it, or try to, we try to fit triangles into squares or squares into
Hmm.
triangles, and
Hmm. Hmm.
we don't let them be themselves. And
Yeah.
I could only imagine how much more fun the world would be if everyone kind of got to be themselves a little bit more.
Very good. And how did you get into teaching?
I always wanted to. I
Okay, that's
always
good.
wanted
Yeah.
to, but there was an opening, and they said flexible hours. So I
Okay.
said, if they have flexible hours, then I would love to do that.
Okay.
Um, but and I actually, it's funny. I also had ambitions of being a screenwriter
Yeah.
until I took a college course, and my professor told me my character, he read like he was autistic, and he's like, was that intentional? And I said it was not intentional. And he said, well, then you have a lot of work to do,
Okay.
and which is good advice. And
Mm.
but one thing I did notice that was, and my uncle is part of the Writers Guild, and so he used to get
Okay.
scripts every year sent to him,
Yeah.
hoping for him to vote for them.
Yeah.
So I've gotten my hands on a bunch of fun scripts over the years, and
Yeah.
what's really cool to see is the difference between the way that they play out in words, and the way that they play out on screen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
interesting.
The
Yeah.
Irishman, for example, which is
Yeah.
right down, I guess, must be down your alley as far as
Yeah. Actually, I've not seen it, but I
Hollywood.
know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
that movie, the script was remarkable. Like, I
Okay.
read the
Yeah.
script, and I was blown away, and I was
Yeah.
glued to it, and I
Mm.
inhaled it, and it was just awesome. And
Yeah.
then I watched it, and I was only disappointed because of how good the script was.
Okay. Okay.
That it didn't
Was the
match up to it.
de-aging thing okay?
I think that was part of the problem.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the problem. I think that, and I hate to say it because they've given so much to the genres and to
Yeah.
cinema, but I
Yeah.
think that, like, Scorsese's got to find a young mobster.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, how old was De Niro when he started in The Godfather 2? I mean,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
anything that he did. Al Pacino. I mean,
Yeah.
these guys weren't starring in The Godfather when they were 80.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
even Marlon Brando
Yeah.
was not even that, was not up there. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem that we have in Hollywood today. And perhaps you could talk about the corruption that, that works in the sense that who gets to get where as far as acting and actors and talent goes. You talked a little bit about the sex and the extortion. I saw that there were some topics
Yeah.
that you dove into. What does it take to be successful in Hollywood?
Oh, yeah. I don't know so much about right now, but I mean, I think all these things is, I think Steven Soderbergh, the director, said,
Hmm.
talent plus perseverance equals luck. And
Yeah.
I think Hollywood is it's so difficult for anyone to sort of to get going. So I think it's just a sort of it is kind of like, well, a lot of work hard, a lot of persistence,
Hmm.
and you hope that with talent and graft and some luck that things will sort of will pay
Yeah,
off.
but there's a whole history of studio executives being taking advantage of, I mean, I don't really know the extent of men. I'm sure that does exist quite a bit because
Mm.
Hollywood has always been kind of a big gay culture, I think.
Okay.
And but I mean, we definitely know tons of stories about the abuse of women and throughout
Yeah, so
Hollywood
like that
history.
sort of whole Harvey Weinstein stuff and the Me Too stuff, which this sort of stuff came out. The Weinstein story came out after the book was written, came out first in 2014. I've since updated it, but yeah, the kind of
Yeah.
history of the sort of casting couch and other things. Yeah, there's been there from the beginning, and you've got very powerful men, you've got a lot of young pretty women. The women will want a break in this career. Some of these men, will try to abuse that position. Some of the women, might see it as, okay, I'm going to sort of see this as a transactional thing, and I hope it plays in my favor. And I'm sure there are plenty of stories where it did play in their favor, and others think actually
Hmm.
it didn't get me very far. I just ended up sleeping with someone, and I didn't get a good part or a good career. And others would have just said, no, I'm not doing it. I mean, I think Ava Gardner, the actress, had sort of said in the 19 would have been 1930s at MGM. She said, "Oh, I knew girls who, if this isn't so much casting couch as like a little bit of prostitution, but she was saying, oh, I know people who, if the rent was low, they give a little bit away. So there's always been an element of sleaze in Hollywood. It was a sort of a new industry that was sort of uncharted at the time, and it's now more than a century old. But I'd say like in the 1930s, it was sort of a very young industry, and yeah, power, beauty, youth, sleaze, corruption in that way. And I think also plenty of decent people just working away, getting on with their lives and jobs.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of reminds. I mean, it absolutely kind of reminds me of today's world in the sense that in order to get ahead, in order to become anything, you either have to work incredibly hard or be incredibly divisive or
Yeah,
incredibly inappropriate. One
yeah.
of the.
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty much one of those.
Yeah,
It's pretty much
yeah,
one of those
yeah,
three.
yeah,
And there are plenty of people that make whole careers,
yeah.
out of a formerly promiscuous reputation or formerly, or people that just stir up hate, and just use a good amount of divisive language that kind of attracts everyone. And that's a good way to get it. And actually, the reason why I started this podcast to begin
Mm.
with was I feel like all this information that we consume could be either junk food or health food. And I think that a lot of the people that kind of get to the top vis-a-vis the junk food method. And the goal of the podcast is to be
Okay.
organic and healthy and to kind of provide reasonable and useful information
Mm.
that could unify people that people want to listen to make their lives better, not because they're getting some kind of outrage dopamine hit, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you sort of hope that yeah, the dopamine hit, the short time sugar rush will pass, and then in time people will kind of find things that are of value that are out
Hmm.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I don't know. The film world has become so democratized, and studios kind of don't even have the same reputation.
No.
There are a lot of people that don't want to go to the movies to the same extent, and they
Yeah,
only
yeah,
want to go for some kind of cultural experience. The
yeah,
problem is it's very difficult to make a cultural experience when no one's going to any movies,
yeah, yeah.
So, it's kind of this spiraling, self-fulfilling death prophecy for studios. And I would love for people to come back to it because
Mm.
I'm actually a huge fan of the embodied, shared,
Yeah,
film watching
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
And one of the best, and I wish that more people had done this. And this also kind of goes back to your originality point earlier, like
Mm.
what stands out, what's something
Mhm.
different. Um, I love to see the good guys lose. I love to see, or at least at first,
Yeah,
And one of my favorite cultural experiences of growing up was going to see the Avengers Infinity War, where the Avengers lost at the end of the first
okay.
at the end of the movie, and the whole movie theater was absolutely packed to the brim,
Yeah,
and there were thunderous moments throughout the film. Everyone
yeah,
was laughing, everyone was
yeah,
crying, and then the film ended on like this dark note,
yeah.
and everyone just kind of shuffled out of the movie theater without really knowing what was going on.
Okay.
And it was so cool to be in
Yeah,
a collective environment
yeah,
where so many people were having highs, lows, highs, a moment of like so close,
mm.
a little bit of hope, and then let down, and then now what? And like you
Yeah,
see people trying to come to terms with like, what do you do now?
yeah.
So I think that we actually missed that. I think that that brings us together.
Mm.
I think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I'm a big advocate of going to see movies.
Me too. And I think that thing about the kind of the down ending is very interesting because you have seen movies where some movies need an up ending, some need a down ending, and you have seen movies over the years where you think, oh, they forced a happy ending on this film because they think it'll
Hmm.
make it more appealing, and it just
Hmm.
feels and you just feel manipulated, and actually it doesn't make it a good ending, and you kind of
Yeah.
think they've they've sabotaged their own film, or the studio has forced them to sort of sabotage their own film, and it's sort of not as good. And actually, you think if they had the kind of courage to say, no, no, this actually film actually ends down,
Yeah.
and it would have had a far greater impact, and would probably have resonated longer than the one that kind of came out and people kind of liked it enough, but kind of quickly forgot about it by the time they got home.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, as far as movies go, I mean, as far as the studios go, rather, we know that they're as hesitant as can be to make creative risks. And
Yeah,
then once the creative risk does work out, they just hope to replicate that
yeah,
ad nauseum
yeah,
until everyone stops
mm,
going to see it.
yeah,
And I mean, we've seen that with franchises
mm,
essentially. And really, what the questions are now for lots of studios is what is the next franchise that we can start so that we have 10 years of movies down the pipeline.
yeah, yeah,
Minions had served, I think about how enormous it was and how well it served for so
mm,
many years. Think
yeah,
about the Avengers, and now,
yeah,
DC is restarting with James Gunn, and now
yeah,
the Mario world is going to
yeah,
be absolutely enormous, or the
yeah, yeah,
Minecraft world. And
yeah,
so these studios are not looking necessarily for dramas or for films about the human condition.
yeah, yeah,
They're looking to copy paste
yeah.
a success formula. And
And I think if if you can,
that's the reason
you
why,
you buy
yeah.
an existing, you license an existing, intellectual property, then they've got, you
Barbie is
hope
going to be a big one.
you hope you've got a you hope you've got a an audience of some scale. Might not
Yeah.
happen, but that's the kind of
Well, there's almost a
that's the
direct
bet.
there's almost always a direct correlation between how the rating, the critical rate, the reviews of a film, and how much money the first one makes, and then the second one always makes more money but gets
Mhm.
worse reviews,
Yeah, yeah,
and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a few
yeah,
rare exceptions like Toy Story or The Godfather,
yeah, yeah,
the original Star Wars movies. But short of that, it's a very
yeah,
difficult thing to do, and a lot of
yeah,
times because they don't want to take the risks, they want to
yeah,
copy and paste
yeah,
the formula that worked. And streaming is got to be the place for creators to be able to do
mm.
that. The real storytelling, I think. You got
But
the
what I think was streaming. The interesting thing is you just have this much wider, many more hours to structure the
yeah,
story. So
that's fun.
rather than thinking I've got to get this film into 2 hours ish, you think actually so
Yeah.
like Gone with the Wind, which whatever it was, 3 hour, 4 hour movie in
hmm
1939. These days they say, well, let's just do it on as a series.
Yeah, and what do you think? I mean, do you think? I mean, that could have been great. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I think that Netflix. I think HBO started it, but Netflix had a ton of success recently with their limited series, where
Hmm.
they have 6, 7 episodes. And I mean, I watched that Scorsese movie. It was like 3 hours long with Leonardo DiCaprio and
Killers
Robert
of
De
the
Niro.
of
Yes,
the
The Killer of the Rising Sun.
something Moon.
Moon?
Killers of
Rising
the
Moon.
yeah, that one.
Killers. Yeah, with
Killers of
the new Scorsese movie is
the
Killers.
Oklahoma one about yes, yeah.
And that could have been a remarkable 5 or 6 part Netflix
Yeah,
short
yeah,
series. In
yeah.
fact, American Primeval was very similar to it in
Okay.
that kind of capacity.
Yeah, yeah,
And you just were able to tell a story super,
yeah,
super, super well.
yeah,
And I know that Peter Berg, the director, has been kind of popping around on podcasts talking about how
yeah,
much fun he's having not being constrained to that typical
yeah,
2 hour thing. And
yeah,
also, rather streaming studios tend to be much more generous with their budgeting.
yeah,
They
yeah,
don't have to answer to a box office. They don't
no,
necessarily have to release
yeah,
numbers in the same
yeah,
way.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so there's a whole different level of responsibility that they have that
yeah,
they can
yeah,
kind of they could tell people like Adam Sandler, do anything you want. It could be
mhm,
the worst thing
yeah,
that you've ever always wanted to make and that you've never got a
yeah,
chance to do.
yeah,
But as long as we see the name Adam Sandler associated with
yeah,
Netflix on top of
yeah,
it, then we are happy to pay anything you want
yeah.
for that.
I mean,
That's
in the 1980s, Woody Allen had that kind of arrangement with United Artists and then Orion, that they were kind of like, well, within a certain budget, you can sort of do what you want
mhm.
to do, and
Yeah.
but their films weren't hugely expensive, and they usually did okay business, and also actually they did well internationally, or at least there was an audience to some extent
hmm
broadly
Yeah.
globally.
And he made quite a few movies at that point, right? With that
I
with
mean,
that
he's
opportunity.
a great example of like a movie a year for
hmm
and only really slowing down. Now he's now 90, but and when things got trickier with the sort of allegations against him, but he's a very sort of and I think the director of Lost Boys, Joel Schumacher, worked in costume many years ago
Oh
on
yeah.
some Woody Allen movies, and he sort of said actually Woody Allen was very good at telling me. I was saying I wanted to write a script and direct myself, and he said Woody Allen was very good at saying, okay, you have to finish the script you're writing, to move on in life. If you want to do that, you've
Yeah.
got to finish the script, and he did finish the script, and at some point became a screenwriter and a director, and had a good career.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
Woody
Yeah.
Allen's a great example of someone, with a very good work ethic.
Yeah. Incredible. Incredible work ethic. I and I guess, and you have two schools of thought. You have the school of thought that says you got to really embody and be the character, and you have to find the project that speaks to you, and you got to
Mm,
find, the perfect story and the perfect script with the real voice, that the kind of
mm,
voice that you're looking for. And then people that, listen, I'm here to act, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it
mm.
work.
Yeah, yeah.
What are some films that have shaped or forged your perspective or appreciation of film? What are some of the iconic movies for you?
So one of my probably favorite filmmakers, probably from the 1940s and 50s, so mainly working in black and white. So would be
Yeah.
Billy Wilder, who
Give me
made
some recommendations, actually, by the way. I would love to look into them.
so Billy Wilder, who made Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard. So he's probably my favorite filmmaker. And in those movies, you have Double Indemnity is a film noir from the 1944 or something like that. Some Like It Hot is a farce.
Hmm.
Um, Sunset Boulevard is a sort of black comedy about Hollywood,
There
and
you
The
go.
Apartment is a great sort of romantic comedy with a kind of Christmas New Year setting, even
Yeah.
from when 1960 with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. So I think I like Wilder's sort of he's smart. His movies are sort of bittersweet. They're funny, but they're not silly. Well, Sonic Hot's very silly, but it's very funny, and
Hmm.
they're charming. And so I like him, and I think he's a very elegant filmmaker. When he was very good in the 40s and 50s, he was a very sort of elegant filmmaker. So you kind of admire the storytelling and
Yeah.
how
Can
how well it comes across.
how would you describe an elegant film if someone like didn't understand that? If someone's listening and they're watching, Marvel and Transformers and, Stranger Things, how would you describe like an elegantly made film that like things that they should be looking out for or that they could be more intentional about when watching?
So I suppose I don't know Marvel or Transformers or Stranger Things very well, so I can't comment on those.
Yeah.
I'd say in terms of the storytelling and it could happen in prose or in a movie where you don't go, oh, that was so obvious, or that was kind of
Hmm.
like, oh, that's kind of dumb. Why does the character do that? I don't believe that. And if there's a revelation, you go, oh, well, yeah, I didn't see that coming, but it's obvious now. So there's that kind of like, sort of, and it's or if you have to kind of feed the information to the audience, it's not done in a kind of now we're going to you know shove some information down your throats. It's kind of there are ways to try and sort of do the exposition so that the kind of it's done with a sort of delicate touch.
Yeah.
Um, and Wilder was very good at those sorts of things when at his best in the 1940s and 1950s. Um, uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're gonna equate, or I guess kind of have a relationship between elegance and nuance, and subtlety and nuance,
yeah, yeah,
that you can pass along and I think that that's also done. I think it's a more effective way of storytelling.
right.
It's a far more effective way. I showed my class the movie Argo,
Hmm.
about the
Yep, seen. Yep,
1980 hostage
yep.
situation in Iran, and then I'm doing hopefully soon a podcast with a gentleman called that runs a website called Spy Culture, and he
Okay.
talks about the government's affiliation association with different films,
Yeah.
and he had a whole article that we read after Argo
Okay.
about the CIA's involvement in the
Yeah.
actual making of the film and the
Okay.
way that they kind of insert themselves
Yeah.
to make them look as good, make
Yeah.
them look as good as possible. And it was done, especially in the film Argo, at least to me, it felt a lot more nuanced, a lot more subtle than a movie that movies that I've seen more recently, where it almost feels like there are slogans that have to be injected into particular films
Yeah.
that are almost uh, like a toll to be made by the studio is like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
you can do whatever you want, but the toll to get in here is you have to
Yeah.
throw this and
Yeah.
this message in.
Yeah.
And even if the film was about that particular message, you got to make it blanket. You
Yeah.
got to make it out there. And
Yeah.
so I guess it does feel like we've lost some of that. I think there are still some great filmmakers that do
Yeah.
kind of focus on that. Have you seen many Damien Chazelle films, the Whiplash or La La Land or Babylon?
I've only seen Whiplash and La La Land.
Yeah.
I've not seen Babylon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts on it would be because I think it was based on 1920s Hollywood as
Yeah,
Hollywood was
no,
transitioning from black and white into color.
I should see Babylon.
I watched it in theaters, and I hate to say I wanted to like it so
Yeah,
badly,
yeah,
and I couldn't bring myself to, and I don't know why.
okay,
But I thought that I thought that from Whiplash and La La Land that he was a really
mm,
remarkable director. And apparently, his story is that he had wanted to make La La Land first, and no one would fund it.
yeah,
And so he made a much lower budget
yeah, yeah.
Whiplash, and then
That sounds
released it for a film
that
festival.
sounds reasonable. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I guess it also goes to like what you were saying earlier about the different ways to get films done is sometimes you got to work hard and just make it yourself or find another project that's smaller budget until you prove yourself,
yeah, yeah.
and show yourself that it happens.
No, I have a friend
Definitely.
who's a playwright in London, and her first play was had too many characters and too many scene changes, and someone said, look, this stage in your career, just write a play about two people in one room, which is what she's gone and done,
Yeah.
and it's on in
Yeah.
London next month. So, so yeah,
There you go. Beautiful.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Really cool. Really cool. What do you think and do you think that there's people or the audience looks for something different in a novel versus a film or that they should be kind of the trajectory of the storytelling should kind of be similar?
But I think one interesting thing about that is obviously is how film and TV has changed novels, like the storytelling
Hmm.
that we now will see in films and television, and that has changed how novelists write. Um,
Yeah.
do audiences look for different things in film as opposed to on the page?
And what would you think about
Well, I
that?
suppose
Yes.
the one great difference is on the page you are well, you can be far more intimate with the character.
Hmm.
You can hear the character's thoughts in a way that on screen people talk, but that isn't necessarily what they're thinking. Or that's just what they choose.
Yeah.
What they're choosing to say or not to say to somebody. Um, so um, the struggle that the screen always has is how to convey people's
What's in your
feelings and
head?
people's thoughts
Yeah.
when you've only got the external, you haven't got the internal voice. Um, but film can do great things, and so can literature, and I enjoy both, and I hope other people enjoy both.
Yeah,
One
definitely.
other film I wanted to,
I mean, the case that always comes to my mind is Harry Potter,
yeah,
because I growing up, I have devoured those books
mhm.
over and over and over again, and the films have let me down time after time after
Okay,
time. At least I felt they couldn't keep up with it couldn't keep up with my
yeah,
imagination
yeah,
from the words on the page, like you
yeah,
said. And there's
yeah,
so much going on in the background of these
yeah,
young adults' or teenagers or kids' minds that are, that cannot be described, acted
yeah,
out or
yeah,
described, I guess,
yeah,
on screen.
yeah.
I'm really curious how HBO is going to do this because HBO has a wonderful history
With the TV
of
series,
of the TV series,
yeah, yeah,
correct?
yeah,
And they have a wonderful history of really packing a lot of emotion and character
mhm,
into films when they have the time and space for it.
yeah, yeah,
Going back to that theme of not giving the audience what they wanted,
yeah,
watching The Sopranos, and when I don't know if you watched it, but there was a scene where where Tony, the main character's therapist, was raped,
okay,
and she has the opportunity to tell Tony
yeah,
who the person that did it
yeah,
was,
yeah,
and you can see, and again goes to what we were just talking about. You can see in her mind the conflict the whole
yeah,
time. You
yeah,
can see that she's
yeah,
chewing back words that she
yeah,
wants to say,
yeah,
and then David Chase does
yeah.
not give it to you.
Oh,
He does
great,
not
yeah,
let you have it.
yeah,
And Tony says, "Are you sure that
yeah,
that everything's okay?" And she looks
yeah,
at him and she looks at the audience. She looks at the camera and she says,
okay,
"Yes." And then
okay,
the screen goes black,
yeah,
and everyone was let down, and
yeah,
everyone was frustrated because all you wanted was this poor woman to get
yeah,
to get her justice,
yeah.
and sometimes in life you don't get justice,
No,
especially if you want to be moral.
no,
Sometimes if you want to play by the games, by the system,
yeah,
then you don't get justice.
yeah. That was good, bold decision from David Chase there, not to give the audience what it wanted, but what he felt was
Yeah.
right for the character or for the situation. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's what makes a great. That's what I think makes a great
mm,
creator
yeah,
is being willing to take risks and have your audience be upset at you,
yeah,
but then understand that what you're trying to do is make
yeah.
something great for them. He's making a great new. Apparently, I'm really hopeful. A new series on the MK Ultra experiments that were going on in the 70s or 60s, 70s in America.
Okay. Okay.
which should be a lot of fun. But
One
yeah,
other film, when you were talking about elegance before, and one other film came to mind, a more recent film, well, 10, 12 years ago. Um, it's a Polish film called Ida, the name of the female character,
hmm
by Paweł Pawlikowski. And I think it's very elegant because it's so pared back in terms of how much information it gives. It gives you only the minimal information, and often many scenes are just like one long shot. I don't find it very mannered, and I just kind of admire it for how um how compact it manages to be.
hmm
So I would recommend that. It is in black and white, so people might not have had the patience for it, but it's from the past 15 years.
Again, I think it's just preparing in the right way. It's just
Hmm.
getting your head in the right space,
Yeah,
and because some of and I'll go through phases depending on what I'm going through in my life,
yeah,
months at a time, where I can't
yeah,
watch a particular genre. I'm just not, I'm just not there, and I'm sitting down and I've been like that with comedies. I've been wanting to watch comedies. I've been consuming a lot of heavier material that are a little bit more
yeah,
philosophical, a little
yeah.
bit more just that tend to be a little bit more serious. And I can't get myself to sit down and watch a comedy, even though I
Mm.
want to take the burden off and I do want
Yeah,
to
yeah.
lighten up. I have to kind of get myself back into that zone.
But that's okay because there's like that. I think was it Umberto Eco or someone like that who said this thing about it's fine to have a lot of books in your house you haven't read because because there's a time and a place for everything. I'm going to come to that book at a certain point.
Yeah, yeah. I've just had to order 5 new books because I went through my bookshelf a couple of times and
Okay.
I couldn't find anything new. But um, yeah, I'm always looking to learn new things and from a different angle. And so I'm really
Yeah.
excited to check out your book. How did you so it was re-released, I guess, or worked on in 2023, I saw.
Okay.
What'd you add on to it?
We updated the kind of the story about Woody Allen and and about Harvey Weinstein and Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So there's some of those sort of because the book was originally called The Dark History of Hollywood. So it was the commission was to sort of look more at the scandal than just general Hollywood.
Hmm.
My own interest is sort of general Hollywood, including scandal, but just how it all worked.
Yeah, overall.
And so we had to update those stories or include the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard story, which hadn't been in the earlier edition.
Have you
Um,
watched the Netflix documentary about that or the series about that?
about Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard?
No, I've not seen that.
So what was your conclusion in the book? What was your perception of the relationship and the conflict and
I suppose one thing is I'm not hugely interested in their relationship. Um, so all I
so what
really,
would you write about?
I mean, I wrote about. I've just reread it today. I wrote sort of 300 words, just sort of kind of writing. How he sued the UK newspaper for libel because they called him
Mm,
a wife beater. I think it was. He lost the case.
right.
How he was dropped from the Fantastic Beasts series after the
Hmm.
second film, I think it was, or maybe the first film.
Yeah.
Um, but then he did win a defamation case against his ex-wife. So there's a bit on both sides, and I kind of wondered, will his, at that point he was approaching 60. Pirates of the Caribbean had run its course. It wasn't going to be any more of the um, Fantastic Beasts films. Would his career come back? None of his other kind of films, the more serious films, had made a sort of critical or commercial impact.
Hmm.
Um, I think he was in something recently that was getting some more attention at a festival, but he hasn't really yet come back. But maybe he will.
Yeah. And he had a really interesting, he's kind of, there's a lot of actors like this where he starts his career with a lot of fun and really unique kind of
Mm,
small indie and
mm, mm.
character-driven films. And then he kind of, and then with Pirates
Yeah,
exploded into another genre of
yeah,
film. But I would love to see him go back to that the kind of earlier movies that he was making, like Blow or What's Eating Gilbert Grape or any of those type of films.
yeah. Great's a lovely film, and also I was like that film where it's a mob film with him and Pacino. What's it called?
Yes, Donnie Brasco.
Donnie Brasco. I really liked. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
these
excellent.
films.
Great book too.
Yeah.
Great book too.
I don't know,
Yeah,
but
that was
yeah, yeah,
that was fun. How do you feel about separating the art from the artist?
yeah. I mean, that's something when you think about with someone like with Woody Allen or something. Yeah. I think I'm kind of all right. Well, one thing is I kind of don't really know what the truth is in these stories. So with Woody
Right.
Allen, there's allegations. he's lost custody of what the children when they was younger, or lost access to them, but he was never charged with anything himself. So there's allegation and counter allegation, but he was allowed to carry on making films because, as far as the courts could see, there was no issue here. Um, I think I'm kind of okay separating the artists from the art. Yeah, and also because I'm sort of more interested in what the art is than who the artist is. So I'm
Yeah,
interested in
yeah.
what the movie is, what the book is.
Like I think it's I'm not really sure what I've thought of. I haven't thought this all the way
Mm,
through yet, but Kevin Spacey was an incredible talent, and
mm,
that has not worked in a very long
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And I don't. And again, as far as the legal case goes, I don't think he was ever convicted of anything. I could be wrong. I don't. I haven't been as in tune into it, but he's another. It's just another example of someone that is just an enormous talent
hmm,
that right or wrong reputation gets. And it
yeah,
very well could be that whatever the
yeah,
allegations were correct. It could be that they weren't.
yeah.
But again, how, like if you're a studio, or how much you're going to let that affect your decision? And I guess the answer is a lot. You know.
Yeah, and I think there are certainly cases. I mean, in the book, we look at Fatty Arbuckle, who was a comedy star in the 1920s, what it was, and his career ended, and you kind of felt that over a scandal where I think he was innocent ultimately, but the studios, the whiff of scandal, they washed their hands of him, but
Hmm.
actually they didn't stand by him, so
Yeah.
um, so you can look at
I
it from
guess for them, it's more of a
that point of
business
view and think, well,
decision.
the studios should have had more backbone. Of course, there are many other situations, such as Harvey Weinstein, where you think, well, actually, um, he was the bully in his own company, and people weren't blowing the whistle on him,
Hmm.
and he was getting away with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, man. And also, it's such a shame because he made such great movies. Like you can't really blacklist anything that has Harvey Weinstein's name on it. If you look at his IMDb, or the collection of
Mm.
films that he's
Yeah,
made, I mean, or at least that he's been associated with. And again,
yeah,
that's another question is and we know that at this point, for example, in today's world, that almost everyone's name kind of gets thrown on, slapped on as producers.
mm. Mm.
Everyone's a producer. If they had any,
Yeah,
if they looked at the script, they're a producer. If they,
mm.
if they talked to the
Yeah,
actor about it,
yeah,
on set, they're a producer.
yeah.
Um, if someone, I don't know how much what you think. I don't know the involvement to the degree that he was part of all these films. That even if you decided that you didn't want anything to do with Harvey Weinstein, that has to do with Dead Poet Society, or every decision that
Mm.
Miramax made or
Hmm.
makes. You know,
I mean, I think with Weinstein, I think someone said, he liked to think that he was creative, and he was
we all do.
initially he was responsible for distributing kind of often like non-US films in the US,
Hmm.
and he was very good at marketing and selling
Hmm.
those films to the US market, and then kind of moved more into producing things himself. But there was always that sort of allegation that he's not really producer, but he's can find the financing for it, and very very good at the awards season
Yeah,
marketing and the
the
kind of
push. Yeah,
the push,
definitely.
yeah,
Push is a good word for it,
yeah,
right? As far as the way they go about it goes.
yeah,
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. But again, so that doesn't have anything to do with him making the film, That doesn't have anything to do with, not watching the film because he pushed it for an award, because he pushed it for a Golden Globe, or for an I don't know what that would have to
yeah.
do
No,
with.
no, it doesn't make me think any differently about, say, the film like The Crying Game. Um, you know, uh, British Irish film from early 1990s. Um, I wouldn't want to work with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine. I wouldn't want to work with a lot of people in Hollywood.
Mm,
That's but and I think that's another institution, I think, that has been kind of reforming and kind of restructuring
mm.
itself. Have you read into, or have you had any thoughts on Disney and OpenAI's recent business transaction
Yeah, no,
together?
I've barely followed that. I know nothing about that. So
It's
explain.
fascinating.
Okay,
Disney invested $1 billion into OpenAI and gave them the rights to use their characters in AI generated films for the next
okay,
3 years. And
okay.
historically extremely protective
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
of their
yeah,
IP.
yeah.
And so it's a really curious decision, but it's also happens to work out very well time-wise because I
Mm.
think that this next year, Bob Iger plans on stepping down,
Okay.
and I, we've heard that plenty of times
I mean,
already.
he's stepped down before. He's come back. Yeah. So
Exactly,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So it's funny. And following the Disney saga, there's an
Yeah.
incredible book I read called Disney War
Okay.
by James Stewart, I believe, is the author,
Okay.
and it's about excuse me, the history of the company from the 80s to the early 2000s,
Okay.
and the corporate battle and the corporate inner workings of the company.
Yeah.
And the biggest issue that Disney has had since Walt Disney himself is that people that run the ship have a very difficult time finding or creating successors.
Yeah.
And so I think that when Bob Iger made this deal, I would speculate,
Yeah.
as someone who is speculating and just
Mm.
reading and listening
Mm.
and
Mm.
following on the side, that there's a risk that he can take with the company because he's not going to be responsible for the repercussions. And that's going to be same way that Bob Chapek took over with during COVID for those couple of
Mm.
years,
Yeah.
while and he kind of watched him fail and then step back in.
Yeah.
I'm very this is a big enough decision that it could be him just saying,
Mm.
I don't want this to tarnish my reputation, but
Yeah.
let's see how the future looks with
Yeah.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, um, Kieran, this is a ton of fun. I really appreciate you taking
Me
the time
too.
to coming
Very good to
on, and
speak. Yeah.
especially again on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed talking to you. This is really wonderful, and thank you so much for your work. And I'm really excited to read your book.
Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you very much for coming. Take care. It
Thank
was
you.
nice
Thank
meeting
you for
you.
this. Thanks.
Bye
Bye.
bye.